Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's meeting of full council. Welcome also to those members of the public and press accessing the meeting via the live stream to YouTube. May I take this opportunity to remind member and officer colleagues to turn their mobile telephones off or to silent and ensure that when addressing the meeting, they speak directly into the microphones, ensuring that the red light is on. Microphones should then be switched off when they are not in use. Moving now to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. I call upon member services to report any apologies for absence, please.
Thank you. We've had apologies from Councillor Mrs Davis, Councillor Mrs Laws, Councillor Topgood and Councillor Warwork.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, election of the chairman. The second item is to elect a chairman for the period to the next annual meeting and to resolve that an allowance of £4,116 plus travelling expenses be paid to the person elected. May I have a nomination, please? Councillor Bowden. And a seconder, please.
Thank you. May I propose Councillor Alex Miscantlin?
Okay, then thank you, Jan, for seconding that. Can I ask, are there any other nominations, please? In the absence of any other nominations, Councillor Miscantlin is duly elected as Chairman of the Council for 2022-23.
Thank you very much for all those who voted to ensconce me in this position for the next 12 months. I will do my best to uphold the standard that has been set by previous chairman of the Fenland District Council and hope we have a very successful year. Resolved for the period of the next annual meeting to resolve an allowance of £1,000 plus travelling expenses to be paid for the person to be elected. May I ask for a nomination? And I would personally like to nominate Councillor Nick Meekins. Do I have a seconder? Thank you very much. Councillor Bowden. Are there any other nominations? No. In the absence of any other nominations, Councillor Meekins is duly elected as Vice Chairman for the Council for the year 22-23. Councillor Meekins, would you like to make an acceptance speech?
Thank you for the great opportunity of being Vice Chairman for the next year. I'll support Alex in whatever ways I can. Whilst I look forward to carrying out the role, there is a tinge of regret that the reason for me being able to carry out the job is due to the ill health of Rob Scolding. I hope that he continues his recovery and we carry on seeing him for many, many years to come.
Thank you, Nick. Before we move on to agenda item 4, I would like to formally acknowledge and thank you, the previous Vice Chairman, Councillor Rob Scolding, for undertaking his role from the year 2020 to date. Rob Scolding, you are invited to
Speak. I'll stand up. I'd just like to thank Alex to start with. I'd like to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity for being vice chairman. It's been a fantastic few years, really has. And I'd like to thank you all for voting me as vice chairman. I do appreciate it. I feel that I've let you down a little bit because I was a little bit ill. And Alex had said to me after my little do, he said, because I said, I'll be back and fighting in 6 months. He said, no, you won't. He said, this is going to be a long job for you. He said, and I have to admit, he was right once again. But no, and also I'd like to thank who have been the stars, I think, of Finland, as member services. They have absolutely been fantastic. And I'd like to give them a special thank you.
Thank you, Rob, for your kind words. We move on to agenda item 4, the minutes of the council meeting held on the 24th of February 2022. Members will find the minutes in their pack from pages 5 to 18 of the agenda. Like to approve those minutes? Does anyone have any queries or alterations they wish to take place? Please raise your hand. No. Thank you. Those minutes are duly signed. Agenda item 5, to receive announcements from the chairman and the council and from the head of paid services. For the chairman, I would like to thank everyone who attended my civic reception in March, and I hope that you, like me, found it a thoroughly enjoyable evening. I would also like to thank member services for their support in organising the event, and indeed all the officers for the way they have adapted to working in such challenging circumstances during the pandemic. Along with the return to the chamber, it is intended for its intended configuration. I am hopeful that a third year as my chairman will return to normality in fulfilling the role for the next planned event, being the annual Macmillan Coffee Morning on September the 29th. There are no announcements from the Chief Executive today. However, before I move to the next items, I'd like a couple of reminders. Firstly, while we acknowledge the reconfiguration of the chamber and its continued exemption of Rule 19 for the standing orders, for the meeting, you are therefore requested to remain seated while you are speaking, and for the avoidance of doubt, therefore, there will be no requirement for you to stand to present a report or ask questions or participate in any debate on the agenda. Secondly, due to being at the start of a municipal year, I would like to provide a reminder of the rules of debate, specifically on standing orders provided. That speeches should be limited to no more than 5 minutes and should be relevant to the subject of the debate. That members may not speak more than once on any item of the debate, save to comment or an amendment, to move any motion which may be moved during the debate, or to raise a point of order or a personal explanation. The following items will be open for discussion. The proposer will not speak again unless they are responding to an amendment or raising a point of order or personal explanation. They will, however, be invited to exercise their right to reply on the conclusion of the debate, where they will have the opportunity to collectively address any questions or concerns. Agenda item 6, suggested dates for the next council meetings for 22-23. They are in your agenda. The meeting dates for 2022-23 are Monday, the 22nd of May, 2023, for the ordinary meetings of the council to be held on. Monday, the 11th of July, 2022. Monday, the 3rd of October, 2022. Monday, the 12th of December, 2022. And Monday, the 20th of February, 2023. I would like to propose the approval of the suggested dates. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Bowden. Thank you for the suggested dates. Is it agreed that those dates or does anyone wish to? Councillor Booth.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. I mean, the only thing I would point out is 2 of those dates, I believe, fall on Wisbech Smoke Parish Council meeting dates. So I may not be able to be here for the whole meeting. That's the only problem with them being moved from, and obviously Councillor Bly as well. So having moved them from the middle of the week to a Monday does cause that slight inconvenience, but
That's duly noted, Councillor Booth. Is there other questions on it? That item is resolved to have been passed. Thank you. We now go on to agenda item 7, declaration of interest. Is to receive declarations of interest under the local code of conduct on any interest under the code of conduct on planning matters in respect of any item to be discussed at this meeting. If you have anything to declare, will you please raise your hand? Councillor Patrick.
I have a pecuniary interest in item number 12 regarding taxi fares and will be leaving the room while that's debated.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patrick. The same. Councillor Wilkes.
Well, as a very taxi reliant person, maybe I should say sort of the same, really. I don't know if it counts, but I'd rather say it rather than not, because being so taxi reliant.
Thank you very much. That's duly noted. Are there any others? No. Thank you very much for that. We now move to agenda item 8 to receive questions from and provide answers to the councillors in relationship to matters which are the opinion of the chairman according to the provision of rules 8.4 and 8.6. Procedural rule 8.6 permits questions on notice to the chairman and leader of members candidate or to the chair of any committee or subcommittee. I can formally record there have been none. Procedure 8.4 permits the leader and the main opposition group and his nominated representative to put questions to the leader. Councillor Cornwall, you have a maximum of 20 minutes should you wish to ask your questions, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I should be able to get them in that period, I think. Right, first one, and this is very strange sitting down rather than standing in a council meeting, but there we are. Okay, so the first question is that given we are now third in a 4th tier local government setup, can the leader assure us that given the apparent shenanigans in the combined authority and the county council, the delivery of our business plan will not be compromised in any way?
Councillor Bowden.
thank you, Chairman. Through you, no, I cannot.
Short and sweet, obviously. Right, okay. Right, I'll do a second one then, that I wonder if it's time that local government in Cambridgeshire was reorganised again, that it was completely looked at, and that somehow or other we sort the many tiers out that we are. Some work was ongoing, I believe, a while ago that we haven't heard of any progress lately. Do you think, or do you have any knowledge of anything that is going on at the moment?
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. I very much sympathise with the intent of the question. It has been government policy as of recent years that changes to the structure of local government in various parts of the country would take place with the consent of the authorities concerned. And those changes have primarily been towards the creation of unitary authorities or the creation of authorities with an elected mayor. It is distinctly possible to quote Councillor Cornwall that as a result of some of the shenanigans we have been seeing in other places, it is a distinct possibility that government may impose changes upon Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, given both the direction of travel at the moment and the way in which it looks as though things may go in the future. I think that would be regrettable, but nevertheless could come to the right answer. I can confirm that I have had surprising conversations with leaders of other councils within the combined authority area about the mechanism which needs to be utilised to abolish the combined authority. And I have been surprised because those conversations haven't been initiated by me, but have been initiated by others whom I was surprised had been looking that up in order to see what could happen. So we are in quite a fluid situation at the moment. And I'm sorry to say that the reason we're in a fluid situation isn't that we are working collectively towards a more coherent and less bureaucratic local government system, but because things are getting so desperate in some areas that people are now talking about the possibility of change either being forced on us or us, as a matter of desperation, making changes. So I'm sorry to give rather a negative answer, Chairman, to Councillor Cornwall, but that's a truthful answer.
Dear Chairman, I don't regard that as a particularly negative answer, to be perfectly honest with you, because it does show that maybe events are bubbling in the background and something will eventually be done to sort matters out. Okay, the second real question, would you confirm that resulting from the question at the last meeting concerning the massive drainage levy that we now pay, or we now have to fund, that you have sent a paper to our MP, as you said you were going to attempt to raise the problem at a national level, and also advise us of any other action that you've taken in relation to that matter.
Thank you very much indeed to Councillor Cornwall through you, Chair. I have been in contact with our Member of Parliament about the situation that we have with drainage boards and with the amount of levy that we pay. And I've also been in communication with councillors in other areas, in fact, slightly outside Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, who share the same concerns about the situation, with a view to us working more together in order to effect change. I'm pleased to say that there are some members of Parliament who are not members of the government who feel able to take action to promote this. And whilst having an MP who is a member of the government can help enormously in affecting change, sometimes when you're trying to get change going, you need to work from outside the cabinet in order to raise the issue. So matters are proceeding as far as that is concerned. As far as the individual drainage levies are concerned, I'm pleased that I believe it was in middle level where it was agreed this year, contrary to the original recommendation, that there would not be an increase in the drainage levy this year. I hope it was middle level. And I'm grateful to all the members. And Councillor Sutton is shaking his head, so maybe I got the wrong drainage board. But I'm really pleased that one of the drainage boards did, the set of commissioners didn't increase as had been planned. And I believe, and I hope to work with Councillor Cornwall on this, that it's going to be important for us to ensure that Fenland District Council, as we come next year towards the setting of drainage levies, that we work together to ensure that we get a full complement of councillors present. Not all of the councillors come from Fenland District Council. Some of the councillors in our drainage boards come from other councils, but we get a full complement of councillors together to ensure that unrealistically high drainage levy proposed increases are not agreed.
Yes, I understand that. I think some of us have been fighting the corner since the annual meetings have been held anyway, and we're doing what we can. But yes, it ultimately comes to a numbers game where we are outvoted, if you like, by the other people that are involved in running the boards. But it is a serious issue. It has just got absolutely out of control, I think, as far as the 1.72 million is concerned. Anyway, my last question, and it's a very simple one. I'm a very simple person, so don't answer that. Further to my previous question about climate change matters, you stated that Councillor Tierney would be presenting the council shortly a council approach to climate change, but no timescale was actually mentioned. So what I'm asking for is, can we have a timescale, please?
Well, you're putting this question to me rather than to the portfolio holder concerned. But
You are a leader.
But as far as I'm concerned as leader, I very much hope and expect that a resolution which has been worked on for some considerable time will be able to be presented to the next full meeting of full council. I'm hoping that that will be the case.
That's good news. Thank you very much. I finished. That's well within my time period.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cornwall. We now go on to agenda item 9 to ask questions of cabinet members and portfolio holders' responsibility in accordance with the procedures rules 8.1 and 8.2. 8.2 permits the questions to the cabinet members about any matter which falls within that portfolio holder's responsibility. Any members wishing to ask a question should indicate by raising their hand to speak individually, and we'll take them in order.
Yeah, my question is to Councillor Murphy. At the last council meeting, I asked if you could possibly visit the open space at Pets Close. I wonder if you actually got around to doing that at all.
No, I haven't done that at all yet. In fact, I haven't been out anywhere, to be honest with you.
That's strange. I have seen a photograph of you in the press in Wisbech, so obviously you did get there
Yeah,
at
but
some
not
point.
to
Also, Councillor Murphy, regarding contract monitoring, I wonder if Tivoli being properly monitored. This week I've had 3 areas that I've managed to get one of the officers to get mown, which haven't been mown at all this year. I have got some photographs I'd like to show you later of Pets Close as well. And upon a tour around town today, I've noticed that other areas of proper grass where kids play hasn't been mown at all this year. I mean, it just seems to me a lack of undertaking to make sure that those areas are properly kept. And it does look very poor on Wisbech.
I'm sorry to hear that, because actually we've had more compliments this year than we've ever had before in grass cutting. But if so, it's been on Facebook and shown on Facebook with people putting photographs on there. So I've seen it, and I've seen it myself in Chatteris as well. But if you could give me where these places are afterwards, I'll send look in for it for you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a question for Councillor Murphy. Apologies, I haven't sent this to you in advance, but it was raised at Parson Grove Parish Council last night about the issue of fly tipping and the blight it is causing in the rural areas. I believe they will be writing, the clerk will be writing to the district council to ask if more can be done in this area. And it was mentioned about more use of CCTV. I know we have the power under the RIPA legislation to do that, but we seldom use it. But I think it's getting to the point now where the amount of fly tipping that's happening, we need to be probably a bit more proactive. Recent weeks, I know I've reported about 3 or 4 items through member services. So is it something you can look at, because you're going to get some correspondence regarding it in the near future anyway?
Yes, Councillor, we do look at it all the while, to be honest with you. It's very difficult to keep up with it, because there's more fly tipping going on now. And enough, some in very small pieces, some in large lorries tipping out. What we're trying to do now is the only way we can sort of get anything through the courts is that we have to sift through all the fly tipping to find any invoices or anything paraphernalia like that we can go back and go to. Unfortunately, as you know, this takes a lot of time and also a lot of effort on the part of our employees to do that. We have had some very good results lately, but it is still growing, and I do agree with that. As you were saying about CCTV, unfortunately, we've tried this, and please don't laugh when I say it, but we've actually had the CCTVs stolen, and when we've done it, so it's not really cost effective to put a CCTV up, and because it's not there long enough anyway, as I say, and even if they don't steal it, they don't go back down there again to catch themselves. Well, that's one of those things. But we are looking at it all the while. I can tell you.
Councillor Murphy, can you turn your microphone off? Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chairman. You'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to raise any questions on WVI or VWI as it became. I'll keep that in my back pocket for another day. A question for Councillor Murphy.
I think you're rather popular today, Councillor Murphy.
Councillor Murphy, I don't know if you'll be aware of the cessation of collection of crisp packets, etc., from TerraCycle. You will be aware, of course, that there is a TerraCycle scheme where they collect crisp packets cheap. They do a range of things, and you'll probably also be aware that there's a little group in Christchurch that collect lots of stuff. And I suppose over the last, I think it's been going nearly 3 years, they would have collected, I guess, and it is a guess, but I guess perhaps close on a ton of various stuff and sent off to TerraCycle. It was real disappointing to get news that TerraCycle are now not taking in crisp packets. So my question is there any views as to taking this vast amount? I mean, it's not only Christchurch that I know mainly do one, I think Whittlesea do, and maybe even one in March. But it'll be a vast amount of stuff that will now go into the green bin, which could be recycled and has been recycled. Is there any intention of bringing that into mainstream recycling? And if not, why not?
Well, not that I know of at the moment at all. It's one of those things that unfortunately it is sorted out when it gets over to Waterbeach, but we have nothing else to do with it when it goes over there. I don't know whether you've ever been to Waterbeach and seen it. It is a very, very good service they do there. And it blows it up and it blows them out and then put them in places and it's packed up and sent away. But they do that. But for a ton, you do need a lot of crisp packets. So I can't say that. So I'm quite surprised when you said that you got it out of Leverage. Yeah, but they're all the same. No.
You use your microphone, Councillor Sutton.
Raised, I think, close on 400 quid for the local school for doing that. So,
well, it's all right. I mean, that's all right if they can do that. And for the local, it takes us a lot of time. We wouldn't have time to do that and sort it all out. That's why it goes. It goes over to Waterbeach and it's done there.
There's no intention of recap looking at.
Not at the moment, no. As you know, I'm chairman of recap.
Yeah.
No.
Okay then, but I have to say that is a shame because there's stuff going into green bin that doesn't have to go in there, and you know we're all trying to save the earth, and it's a shame that obviously TerraCycle has finished and we can't somehow or another pick up that.
I suppose the answer to that is why is TerraCycle finished?
Sorry, I keep feeling it as well. The report to the Committee on the Structures of Political Balance and Allocation of Seats to be found on pages 19 to 36 of the agenda pack. I call upon Councillor Bowden, Leader of the Council and Portfolio Holder responsible for the governance, to propose the report. Councillor Bowden.
I formally propose this. I'd be happy to, if I may reserve my right to speak later, if anyone does have any questions, might be the best way of proceeding because the report does largely speak for itself.
Do I have a second?
I don't think there's any need. The paper does speak for itself. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
Accepted.
Yeah. All those, we could go to the vote. All those in favour of the proposal, please raise their hand. Thank you. Those against? No, that is passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's go on to agenda item 11. In relationship to Fenland District Council's appointments and nominations for the Combined Authority Board of Committees can be found on pages 37 to 44 of the agenda pack. Members will be aware that due to the elections, it was not possible to table the proposed appointments and nominations at the time of the agenda was published. You should see, however, you received a copy of the appendices 1 to 3, and you will find the paper version on your desks. This information
It's been published.
it's to be published.
It is
My
published.
apologies, it's to be published. This information will be published online on the 10th of May. It was called on Councillor Bowden to propose this report. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chairman. This requirement comes from the way in which the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority is set up, and it is necessary at least every year, and sometimes more frequently, but at least after each set of local elections each year, for the proportion of councillors elected for any registered political party to be calculated for the Combined Authority area as a whole, so that various committees within the Combined Authority area can be allocated the appropriate number of seats. And then, once those numbers of seats have been allocated to the registered political parties, it is determined by the officers of the Combined Authority how many of which political party are appointed from which particular local authority in order to match the numbers required. Whilst there have been some changes in terms of the political proportionality of seats within the Combined Authority generally following the elections which took place earlier this month, there is no change so far as the allocation of those seats to political parties within Fenland. So we have the same proportionality in the allocation of our seats as we had a year ago. And it is being proposed that all of those who were put forward last year to serve on the various committees and panels will continue to do so, with the exception that one change was made, which is not reflected in the papers, and that is on the Combined Authority Housing and Communities Committee. Councillor Mrs. Laws was made the primary member, and I was made the substitute member as far as that committee was concerned during the course of the year. And I would propose that that continue to be the case. Apart from that one change, I'm happy to propose the motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bowden. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Connor. Councillor Connor, do you wish to say anything?
At this time, Chair, thank you. I think it's all been said by Councillor Bowden. Thank you.
Very much. It's now open for debate. No one wishes to speak, so is that agreed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Go on to agenda item 12, licence report taxi tariff. There's no need for him to leave, is there? He just uses
As long
taxis.
as he remains open-minded, he can stay.
Yeah. He can stay. Thank you. Item 12 requests members of the to adopt the proposed increase in Hackney carriage vehicle table of fares. The report can be found on pages 45 to 52 of the agenda pack. I will now call upon Councillor Humphrey as chair of the licensing committee to report the.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it gives me pleasure to present this report regarding the increase in the rates for the Hackney Carriage Vehicle Table of Fares. You will note from the report this was last increased in 2019, but following a request for an increase received from the trade in January of this year, the proposal went out for consultation. Details of the consultation are in the report, as are comparable fares with neighbouring authorities and redacted responses to the consultation. The licensing committee met on April the 20th to consider the consultation response and recommend the table of fares as set out in Appendix B. And you can compare with Appendix C, there's a slight increase in those fares. Under the current constitution, the licensing committee is required to seek full council approval for this recommendation, which is to approve the proposed table of fares as recommended by the licensing committee at Appendix B, and I so move.
Thank you very much, Councillor Humphrey. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mayor. Do you wish to speak now, Councillor Mayor, or do you reserve the right to? Thank you. Right, the item is now open for debate. Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. If it pleases the Chair, I'd like to actually propose an amendment and then speak to that. So the amendment I'm proposing is an additional amendment for licensing officers to conduct a review into the availability of taxi provision within Fenland and report their findings to the licensing committee to make recommendations to full council as appropriate. Would you like me to speak to that now or ask the seconder first?
I'll ask for a seconder first. Councillor Connor.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that, Chair, and reserve my right to speak if indeed I need to. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Count, would you like to proceed with your?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'll keep this simple and sweet. And to be quite honest, it was a very opportunistic amendment proposal rather than any difficulties with the paper whatsoever. The licensing committee, as usual, has done an excellent job under the chairmanship of Michael Humphreys, and I fully endorse the recommendations as laid out, and I will be supporting them no matter what happens to my amendment. But I just thought it'd be an opportunity for me to highlight the experience, what I initially thought was the provision in March Town Centre that's been reported to me by many people, and I've experienced it myself, of the difficulty sometimes in actually getting a taxi, particularly on a Sunday when there is almost a non-existent service. In fact, I do believe on most occasions it is non-existent. Having broached this conversation, not due to the actual report in front of me, but just due to conversations I have, and yes, I'll admit some of them were in a pub, Chair. It's been reported to me by landlords and by other customers that they also find it really difficult to get a taxi on occasion, particularly on Sundays and particularly late hours. When I raised this with a few other councillors, I found out that there was some alignment with other towns within Fenland, and some of the other places found similarities in Chatteris, Woodsea and Wisbech, some to the same degree, some more, some less. Obviously, I wouldn't expect I would expect the villagers to have more difficulty, but March is a major town. So I'm quite concerned when we don't actually have what appears to be a provision on a Sunday. So I have no idea what the cause of that is. It may be money, it may be due to tariffs. That certainly wasn't borne out in the consultation responses to any large degree. It may be unconnected to finances, and it might be simply a shortage of people for various other reasons. It might be the difficulties in getting licenses. I'm not here to provide the answers, and I'm certainly unqualified to do so. But I've used this opportunity to put forward this recommendation in the hope that officers could go away and talk to the appropriate people and try and find out why it is that we haven't got good coverage here. And therefore, if we find some significant areas that pop up that are regular, whether we could have an action to deal with it. So it's quite a simple recommendation. Look into why we haven't got a good availability of a taxi service. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. It's now open for debate, and I call upon Councillor Steve Tierney.
Yes, thank you. I did just want to, the reason I asked to speak, I will address what Steve Councillor said, but the reason I asked to speak is because when you introduced this, Chairman, you said the rise in taxi fares, and I'm sure you didn't mean to, but as I understand it, that's the maximum fare they can charge. They can charge less if they want to, and that's important. Otherwise, some of the public might think we are insisting on a rise in fares, which we know is not the case. We are just setting a maximum fare. Whether or not that's correct, I think, is open to debate. But Councillor Count raises an interesting point. I don't use taxis very often, but I have on occasion, and have found it difficult to get a taxi sometimes, particularly late at night, actually, in a way that you wouldn't find elsewhere. But why? I mean, that could be because the demand is no longer there, and so people aren't coming forward to do it, or it might be because it's too difficult to become a taxi driver and we are putting obstacles in the way of the business. I don't know which. And so I support the idea of officers having a look at it. And I would even suggest maybe you might want to have a couple of councillors on there to give an insight that isn't just officer led, which I think will, to some degree, sometimes reinforce what has been found before. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I've often spoken to taxi drivers about this and said, why is it so hard to get a taxi? And the reason they say to me, and of course it's only the ones I've spoken to, so I don't know if this is representative of the trade, is that it's not worth it financially because the maximum fare we set is quite low. And even with the new proposed fare, £4 for the first part of the journey is still quite cheap, really. I mean, I know £4 is not, is still a significant sum of money, especially if you are reliant on taxis. But with the price of diesel at the moment, £1.82, I think I paid yesterday, it's £4 doesn't get you very far, especially when you've got your insurance costs and similar things like that. So I do wonder if it is the fare. So I'll be interested to see if that comes back in the report. That'd be very interesting. One thing I did notice in the report, which I actually I learned something at that licensing committee that I wasn't previously aware of. I thought we had to set a maximum fare, but we don't actually have to set a maximum fare at all. We could set no maximum fare and allow people to the market to determine the natural rate. I don't know what the consequences of that would be, but it might be interesting to also ask officers to look at that too, because obviously it might sound like a good idea, but often things then have knock-on consequences you haven't thought of. So there might be a problem I'm not thinking of with that.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Any other? Councillor Wilkes.
First of all, agree with what a lot of the stuff has been said previously about it being so difficult to get a taxi. It is absolutely impossible to get one on a Sunday, and absolutely impossible pretty much to get one any time after 6 o'clock on a weekday evening, which means that, if you are absolutely reliant on them, you're pretty much imprisoned at those times, which quite honestly, in an area like this and in this day and age, is an absolute joke, really. It is something I've actually, I believe, brought up with licensing before as well. But what I would also like to say is, if we have absolutely got no option but to have this increase, certainly what my concern is for those people who are taxi reliant, but also on, say, means tested benefits and pensions, because effectively, if, on top of all the other ways that we're being slammed, if we're now going to have to put up with this, we're exchanging one evil for another. So if we have actually got to, if we've absolutely got to have this tariff increase, is there going to be any sort of additional help or concessions for such people so that we are not effectively priced out of the market?
Councillor Woods. Are there any other? Councillor Lynn.
I think, in my opinion, most taxi drivers earn their money on a Friday night and a Saturday night, and they're probably out till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, if you're a taxi driver and you've been out all night on a Friday, all night out on a Saturday night, you're out sitting in your taxi all day Saturday, you get 3 calls, you earn 15 quid. Just giving up the day that you could have had with your family for 15 quid. And I think in our towns and in more rural areas, I don't think they get that many calls on a Saturday, on a Sunday. and that's probably why they don't go, and that's probably why they're not there. So,
Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I would have said that it's down to market forces, isn't it? It seems to me if this problem is so bad in so many towns, those that claim to be entrepreneurs ought to be buying a taxi. Thank you.
That's a good point, Councillor Sutton.
Before, and I only speak more speakers on the amendment before Councillor Humphrey speaks, because he would like to exercise his right.
To Councillor Humphrey.
Are there any more speakers on the amendment?
Are there any more speakers on the amendment? Councillor Booth.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I know Councillor Count did make reference to the villages, but yeah, let's make sure we include the review that looks at the impact on the villages. There are some good, I think, local firms that do look after the villages, but again, the provision of service and the cost of it is a barrier to people living in the villages, particularly if they want to get into towns, and therefore that's affecting the economy of the towns as well. So let's just make sure that's included.
Thank you very much, Councillor Booth. Are there any more? No. Councillor Humphrey, would you like to come back and answer any questions?
Yeah, just to pick up on one or two of those points if I can, Chairman. Obviously, I'm happy to take this away and ask, I think the recommendation is for licensing to conduct a review, bring that back to the licensing committee with a recommendation for council. I mean, I think that's the common sense way of taking that forward, because licensing can easily conduct consultation with the trade. Just on the numbers of drivers, we actually have 134. It says in the report there's 134 licensed drivers, 93 of which are hackney carriage. And actually these fares just do relate to hackney carriage, not private hire. So there is an opportunity to book a private hire one. So certainly happy to take this as an amendment and look at the availability of taxis in the district.
Thank you for that. Councillor Connor, do you wish to make a presentation on it?
Yeah, I do, Chairman. Really, I've got nothing to add to Councillor Count's excellent but simple amendment, and I trust this will be supported by this council. And if councillors are to be involved in further discussions at Councillor Tierney's suggestion, I'd be delighted to be involved, and will be possibly, because I'm on the licensing committee anyway. So I thank Councillor Count for that amendment, and again, hope the council support it. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? No. So we now move to a vote on the amendment. Licensing officers have been asked to conduct a review of the availability of taxis provisions in Fenland and report their findings to the licensing committee to make recommendations to the full council. Is that agreed? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Now we'll continue with the substantive debate.
Sorry?
No, we're not quite finished. That was just the amendment. Right, so now continue with the substantive debate. Just the amendment. So are there any further speakers?
Are there any further speakers on the substantive debate, the original one? No.
Okay. So are the recommendations agreed?
So apart from that, are the recommendations that for the substantive and the agreed amendment agreed? Please show.
Okay.
That's unanimous. Thank you. Yeah. Lynn's not here, that's it. Yeah, he's gone to the room. That's right. We move on to the agenda item 13, the council's constitutional response in relationship to the Fenland electoral review proposals for the warding arrangements, pages 53 to 106. Members request members to consider and approve the content of the Fenland District Council's consultation response to the LGBCE to be delegated to the authority for officers to submit this to them prior to the deadline of the 6th of June 2022. I call upon Councillor Bowden, leader of the council and portfolio holder with responsibility for governance, to report on this report.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I start, may I just ask you to give me 30 seconds notice before my 15 minutes start?
I'll do more than that.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'll do more than that, Councillor.
Much appreciated. Thank you. Right, I won't go through the history of how we got to where we got to in terms of the LGBCE and the changes in the ward boundaries for Fenland District Council and the resultant changes that there would be for town council boundaries in our 4 towns. We made a submission to the LGBCE and they responded in March, and they responded by agreeing with many of the proposals which were put forward by the council. However, they made some changes in terms of their recommendations for the next stage. They made minor changes in Wisbech Town to do with the boundaries between various wards, and they did so primarily to ensure that no town wards were created which were unreasonably small. They were relatively minor changes. They also made changes in the town of March, and rather than agreeing the proposals which had been put forward by this council, they agreed with the proposals which were put forward by the independent group of councillors about the most appropriate way of dividing the town of March between wards. There were sessions which took place for all councillors, for members in each area, to discuss the comments which have been made by the LGBCE and to consider how we should respond to them in this stage of the consultation. And a member working group met after those sessions took place. Now, I have to thank Councillor Maureen Davis, who's sadly not here today, but who suggested quite early on in this process, after the proposals were put forward in March by the LGBCE, that it would be helpful to increase the number of councillors to 43 rather than 42, or if necessary, leave it to 42, because there could be a better scheme of warding which would be available within the town of March were we to do so. And whilst that didn't work out with a proposal to increase the number of councillors to 43, it did remarkably work out extremely well indeed on the basis of 42 councillors using the historical links there have been, especially at county council division level, between Christchurch and March and Benwick and March. And by doing that, and by having Christchurch and Benwick brought into March as they had been previously in county council divisions, it was possible for a scheme of 10 councillors covering Christchurch, Benwick and March to be created, which managed to utilise the 2 strongest dividing features that there are within March. That is the river, all the way from the eastern boundary of the town of March, all the way through to the A141, and the A141 itself, the Isle of Ely Way, as it goes down to the Wimbledon roundabout. So that scheme, that allowed a division to take place of councillors, of 5 councillors in one part of March, 5 in another, and that was able easily to be divided up and very conveniently divided up, especially by the main road going south from the town centre, into 2 wards of 3 members and 2 wards of 2 members. And the member working group, or those members who were present at the member working group, agreed unanimously to propose that to move forwards to the LGBCE for the 6th of June deadline. Additionally, we agreed to accept the minor changes which the LGBCE suggested within the town of March. We also had concern about some of the town council boundaries which have been put forward. We wanted to, and we want to, maximise the coterminosity of district and town wards where regulations permit that. And when it comes to the name of town council wards, we wanted to ensure that where town and district wards are coterminous, then the same name should be used for both wards. But where town and district council wards are not coterminous, there should be a different name used for the town and district wards to avoid confusion. So those, in summary, are the proposals which we have in front of us here today, and I'm happy to propose them, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Connor. Do you wish to exercise your right to speak now or afterwards?
I'm quite happy for Councillor Bowden, his motion or speech, and I'm quite happy to take that as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The item is now open for debate. Councillor Councillor Humphrey.
Just a comment, Chairman. I actually think it would sound better if it was Roman Bank and Parson Grove, but it's just a comment.
Duly noted. Councillor Booth.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to say too much because I think we've said much at previous meeting on the previous mission. It's very apparent that if you're not part of the ruling group, your comments are not going to be taken on board. So I won't be supporting this. But I do want it to be put on record that the parish councils that I represent, Parson Grove, Wisbech, St Mary, are very disappointed with this process and the fact that the district council hasn't taken on board comments that they provided, which Councillor Bowden attended Wisbech, St Mary, and they, he's had them coming face to face. That's all I wish to say, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Booth. Councillor Bowden, would you like to sum up?
Quite briefly, Chairman, thank you. It is in the nature of boundary changes.
Councillor, can I stop you there before summing up? I didn't notice that Councillor Sutton wished to speak. Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very briefly, it will come as no surprise to anyone in this room, in this chamber, that I won't support this. I've never supported any increase in members because I think it's totally unnecessary, and I do not support the boundary changes as they are. Putting villages in with towns has never been a good idea, and never will be a good idea because they're very different packages. Village people don't want to be associated with the towns and vice versa. So
thank you very much. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll be supporting it. I think when you do something like this, you're never going to come up with a scheme that everyone's happy with. You're always going to get accusations of this, that, and the other. I mean, I've worked hard in my ward for a long time, which essentially now won't exist anymore, goes into another ward. I don't know what effect that will have, but I'll do my best wherever it is, whatever the future brings. I don't think we're going to resolve everyone's differences on this at all. But I'm not sure that Councillor Sutton is right about villages and towns. I mean, people choose where they want to live, but I think we all try to knock along quite well together. And I know a lot of people in villages around Wisbech who will often describe themselves as living in Wisbech in the right sort of discussion. When they will often tell you, you'll say to them on a board, they'll say, well, I live in Wisbech, and it turns out they're from Emneth or from Elm or from Leverington or whatever. And so sometimes they'll talk about being in the village, sometimes they'll talk about being in the town, depending on what the conversation suits. And I don't think people get too het up over ward boundaries, if I'm honest. What they want is a councillor who will answer them when they need help and know who to go to. And that is down to us to deliver, not down to the ward boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Patrick. Councillor Cornwall.
Yes, Chairman. Yeah, I think that we do have an impasse here to a certain extent. We're never going to satisfy everybody. Let's be perfectly honest in this, but there we have noted a number of things in the paper, and in fact in from the commission itself. So I think it's no secret that in fact, FIA will be totally against this. But we will obviously be generating our own response. And I think, as Councillor Patrick has said, we will be asking for a recorded vote on this particular matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bowden, would you like to do your summing up?
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. As has been said, there is no system of ward boundaries which will ever satisfy everyone. And the way in which the Local Government Boundary Commission go about its work is to use the statutory criteria which exist to do with efficient and effective local government, to do with the strength of boundaries which exist, and also to have a reasonable degree of electoral equality, to ensure that the council wards, as best as possible, reflect the communities which exist within the area, and particularly don't split communities in two unnecessarily. They themselves often have to make compromises with those criteria in order to produce a final result, because not only are you unable to change some of those strong boundaries, like, for example, the river going through March and the A141, the Isle of Ely Way, but also it's just a matter of where, in our case, using the 2027 projected electorates, where the electors actually will be and what area they will fall within. And it becomes, to some extent, a numbers exercise and a technical exercise to balance all of those different criteria. And I've seen many of these LGBCE consultations and final results which have come out over the last 12 years. It's a process, I'm sorry to have to admit, that I follow quite closely around the country. And I am quite certain that the proposal that we are putting forward here matches the criteria of the LGBCE as far as it is possible to do so. It's not perfect, but nothing ever will be perfect, I'm sorry to say. And so therefore, I'm very happy to propose this motion. Thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
Thank you very much. A recorded vote has been requested and can be taken with the support of 6 members. Is the request supported by 6 members? The answer to that is yes.
So do now ask member services to take the recorded vote.
I will now ask member services to take a recorded vote. Thank you. To member services.
Thank you. Okay, call out the names in alphabetical order. Councillor Benny. Yes. Councillor Bly.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Councillor Bly. Against. Councillor Bowden.
For.
Councillor Booth.
Against.
Councillor John Clark.
Yes.
Councillor Sam Clark.
Yes.
Councillor Connor.
For.
Councillor Cornwell.
Against.
Councillor Count.
For.
Councillor Devine.
Against.
Councillor Mrs. Jan French.
For.
Councillor Kim French. 4. Councillor Hay. 4. Councillor Hoy. 4. Councillor Humphrey.
4.
Councillor Lynn.
4.
Councillor Marks.
Abstain.
Councillor Mason.
4.
Councillor Moore.
No.
Councillor Mayor. 4. Councillor Meekins.
4.
Councillor Miscanlon.
4.
Councillor Mockett.
4.
Councillor Murphy.
4.
Councillor Patrick.
Against.
Councillor Purser.
4.
Councillor Rackley.
4.
Councillor Seaton.
4.
Councillor Scolding.
4.
Councillor Sutton.
Against.
Councillor Tierney.
4.
Councillor Wicks.
Against.
Councillor Wilkes.
Against.
Councillor Hewlett.
Against.
We'll just wait for member services to collate that result.
Okay, I can announce we have 23 in support, 10 against and 1 abstention.
Thank you very much for that. That motion. Therefore, the recommendation in relationship to the LGBCE consultations are agreed. The next item agenda is the exemption session. What do we do for this? The remaining item on the agenda has been identified as containing information that will be exempt from the disclosure under paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972, in that it contains information relating to the financial and business affairs of Finland District Council and a third-party organisation. Furthermore, the public interest test has been applied to the information contained within the report, and it is considered that the need to retain that information as exempt outweighs the public interest in disclosing it. Can I ask any member who does not agree with this assessment and therefore proposes the exclusion of the press and public from discussions of this item, please raise your hands in objection. Councillor Booth, Councillor Sutton. What are your objections?
Well, I fail to see why we need to exclude the press and public, because we're effectively talking about public bodies at the end of the day. It will be in the accounts, so I feel that for the sake of transparency, it should be discussed.
Councillor Sutton.
Chairman, I agree. I don't ever recall, I'm not 100% sure, but I don't ever recall that this kind of thing was, under exemption. I don't quite know where we're going with it. It seems just to run of the mill to get on with it and do it in public. What is it to hide? I don't see anything.
Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chairman. It is quite in order for councillors to raise this question and for us to have a debate about whether or not these matters should be considered as an exempt item. So there's nothing wrong with making that proposal. However, there is the requirement of the Local Government Act 1972, which makes it quite clear that the commercial matters relating to a council, including the council which is discussing it, or another public body, they are to be treated as exempt unless the public interest is so great that it overrides that contractual right to privacy for contractual matters such as this. And consideration has been given by our monitoring officer as to whether that public interest test is achieved, and she has come to the conclusion that it is not. But it is not merely we who face in this position, but also all of the other partners within the ARP, who similarly at their council meetings or cabinet meetings, depending upon their constitution, have had to consider this matter, and have also all, to the best of my knowledge, done so under the exemption which is given by Section 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, precisely for the same reason. So I do agree that the matter concerned is not going to be contentious, but legally it does fall within that parameter which is set down by the Local Government Act 1972, and that's why it's appropriate for us to discuss it as an exempt item.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden. Thank you. Member Services, can you please now make necessary arrangements to sever the link to YouTube, enabling us to continue the meeting with the exempt session?
Chairman, with the greatest of respect, given that we've had a debate on the subject, it is actually correct for there to be a vote to exclude the public and press.
Yes, we have a vote to exclude the public and press. Can you please show your hand?